All right, let's take a look at China, or continue to take a look at China. So you have growing internal problems. The population booms from 1790 to 1850. That causes a lot of unrest. Cash crops. They're growing crops for cash instead of food, and that leaves people to go hungry. So you have the Taiping Rebellion. Name given to Hong's movement. He considers himself Jesus Christ's brother. So you can see the influence of Christianity in China, but sort of takes a spin saying this guy thinks he's Jesus Christ's brother. And he gets a pretty big following. It's somewhat successful, but by 1864, the rebellion was defeated by internal fighting and outside attack. So he wasn't able to sort of liberate China from the West. And then foreign influence grows. So as Europeans, or at least the British, start to see all these threats manifest, they start to kind of like clamp down more on China. Concessions are granted, so basically other countries are granted permission to use China. Mostly by the British. The Chinese are kind of like, hey, what's going on with my country? But the British are sort of running things now. Europeans and Japan gain spheres of influence, and we talked about that before. They control certain areas, kind of like in Africa, if you can control it, you can have it, sort of thing. The U.S., kind of late to the party, they declare open door policy, and that's because the United States, they sort of take the Pacific, or take command of the Pacific, and then that sort of, leaves European powers kind of weakened because they're so far away from their home country. And by now, the United States has like one of the most modern navies in the world, so they're really nothing to screw with. And there's pushes for reforms, but they sort of fail. And then you have the Boxer Rebellion in 1900. Peasants launch the Boxer Rebellion. It was called the Boxer Rebellion because the Chinese came at Europeans with fists and feet instead of guns. So the instead of guns is why they are defeated. They actually take the capital of Beijing, but it wasn't enough to hold it. After this, Chinese nationalism surges, China for the Chinese. And here's a depiction of the Boxer Rebellion. You can see some of them have weapons, but a lot of them didn't. And that's why they called it the Boxer Rebellion. So you're going to fill this out on your own, just in class. Pause the video to write it down. One thing we need to take out or talk about are alliances. Now, at the beginning, we talked about nationalism. Then we talked about basically the entire middle of this is about imperialism. Then we need to talk about alliances. So a lot of European countries found that if they work together, national benefit or their collective benefit grew. So you have countries like France and England. They have, open ports and can get around the Mediterranean now that the Suez Canal is open. Germany and Austria are pretty much landlocked. They want to get in on the stuff too, but they don't really have a well-developed navy. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to connect all the way down into the Middle East to get at oil. So you can see like a little train track, all the way down. Some of this area in here, and they made an alliance with Turkey. Russia sort of is allied with this area here. And there's just this thin strip that they don't really have command of to get down into the Middle East to get oil up into their country. And this causes some European tension. And you may have heard of a little war called World War I. And that sort of becomes, this becomes an issue that contributes to World War I. And this pretty much ends the unit presentation. You're welcome.